Welcome to Mind Body Podcast. I'm your host, Devi Sundar, founder of Tele-Therapies and BreatheThrive. And each month, I bring you insightful interviews with experts in well-being, mental health, sleep, nutrition, movement, mindset, and more. Today's topic is harnessing tiny habits for lasting change, where we dive deep into the world of habit formation and health optimization. And today, we have a special guest on our podcast, Mr. Tony Winyard. He's a health coach for over 8 years, and he had other experiences around DJing and nutrition and other things. So I'll give the floor to Tony to explain who he is to the audience because he's going to provide a greater value by defining himself at the start. Tony, welcome to the podcast, and it's my pleasure to have you here. And please tell us more about you.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was a DJ for a long time. I worked all around the world for 12 years as a DJ. And I lived in the Far East for quite a long time. And I got exposed by living there for so long to they have a very different way of doing things and thinking about things, especially when it comes to health. And that definitely influenced me. And then certain things that have happened in my life over the last 20 years to my mum who had sort of quite bad cancer and some other things led me to this fascination and curiosity about wanting to know more and more about health. And yes, so I've been a health coach for the last sort of, about 7, 8 years.
That's inspirational. So your personal experience has led to, because there is an emotional connection to what you're doing, which is going to get more value for people out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, great. And in terms of you also own a channel, YouTube channel yourself, isn't it? It's Abbots and if I
Oh,
remember,
habits and health. Yeah, habits and
Abbots and
health. Yeah.
Health. Yeah, yeah, that's right. And you have huge number of collections of videos over there. And you interviewed many people around related fields, and they've shared their experience. I had a very little brief opportunity to before the podcast to look into your channel, and I would promise that I'll go deeper after this. So it adds value. Now, with that being a new background and expertise, how would you see the power of tiny habits impact individuals' health journey?
I think habits is, for me, it was the thing that tied it all together because as I mentioned, I was learning a lot about nutrition, sleep, stress, breathing, and all of these things are so important. But if someone is not able to create a habit out of any of those things, it's almost a waste of time. So it was really when I discovered tiny habits and that methodology and how helping someone ingrain a new habit or change a habit that they don't like, it made things so much easier for the people I was working with.
Great, great. So, again, I have actually read this, it's back with neuroscience as well. From childhood, whatever we observe from other people is actually imprinted in our mind. And that actually turns into our behavior to some extent. We stimulate other people's behavior, especially the first role model for any individual is their mother and father in their own family. Right. And whatever the habits, not only I'm talking about the behaviors of how they interact and communicate, but also even the little habits, which is like the major thing, the food, what they intake, the habits of food and the active lifestyle, what their parents do, some to a greater degree impacts your childhood memory. When we talk about, I'm also by background a psychotherapist and a respiratory physio. So talking about this psychological childhood and in psychodynamic, we go into deeper into each individual behavior related to childhood experience, early experience. So whatever people are actually, when you say that habits, it's defining their self identity from the childhood, what they observe. Do you agree that?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you mention about childhood because I would distinguish conditioning and habits because habits is something we're often aware of, even if it's a habit we don't like. Whereas conditioning, and we were conditioned as kids, not that doesn't mean it was done, sort of negatively or done to make things, to cause harm to anyone. But we just repeat what our parents, what our family does, and that's what is normal to us. So that's just our conditioned behavior. And very often we have no awareness of the things that we've been conditioned to. We don't realize what we think of as normal may be actually really unhealthy. There's just no awareness of that whatsoever. But then with habits, I think people are generally aware of some of their habits that are not really helping them.
Sure, sure. I do agree. So, and also like as this is actually you distinguish the right word, the conditioning and what they observed, and we actually because we have been observing, it is conditioned in our mind. That is a normal pattern and behavior. And now do you also agree, like, as we get older, after 30 years, when we try to change any behavior, it needs some kind of self-discipline to a greater extent, and also a little harder to change, but still it's possible. Change is possible once you're committed for that change. I've not watched your YouTube videos. Maybe you've touched that in your previous interviews and other things. So if you could talk about that a bit.
Yeah, yeah, it is harder, but as you say, it's definitely not impossible. And it depends on what it is, because for some things, for some people, are extremely difficult. But those same things will be very easy for other people who are maybe the same age. So it's so, it depends on so many different factors. So yeah, we are more maybe set in our ways as we get older. That can mean it's harder to change certain habits that are becoming ingrained, but it's definitely not impossible to change almost any habit.
Right. Okay. So change is possible. Our brain has a greater neuroplasticity for that change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I also see that you have a neuroscience certification as well, and you had dipped into that as well. So it's so fascinating that you have actually explored many different areas, like in your life, when it comes to your career journey. And is there any kind of motto behind it for exploring different areas? And is it that your you see a value like you have to be knowing everything, or is it that you can bring value to different fields, or you want to, I'm actually trying to understand your motivation behind the exploration of many expertise what you're having.
I have a I'm Do you know the VIA character strengths? So you take this test and it tells you what your signature strengths are, what what you do on a sort of daily basis, and the things that the one of my biggest character strength is curiosity. I'm very curious about things, and I have very much, and love of learning was also very high in my character strengths. I'm constantly reading, listening to podcasts, just all the time. I'm doing that, and so anything that I find a new subject or something that I start reading about, I'll often want to learn a lot more about that. But as to what really got me into all of this, into delving so deeply into health, is I sort of touched upon it very earlier. My mum had very bad cancer. She had quite aggressive cancer, and she was on aggressive chemotherapy. And the doctors never ever suggested to her that she should change how she's eating or change anything about her lifestyle. And I kept trying to persuade her to eat maybe a little bit more healthily and to make some other lifestyle changes. But because I didn't have a white coat, she wasn't interested. She didn't listen to anything I said. She had the white coat syndrome as such. So if a doctor says it, yeah, she would do it. But if it wasn't a doctor, she wouldn't listen. And it became really frustrated. And my mum passed away, a few years ago. And I just wished it was so frustrating that if she'd have made some changes to the way she was eating and some other lifestyle things, things could have been so different. So that was some of my motivation. I really to delve so deeply into aspects of health.
Yeah, yeah. And sorry to hear about your loss. And did you mention that you lost your mom 2 years ago?
No, it was 6 years ago.
6 years ago. Yeah, yeah. And still it's the laws. And but you have learned something out of it that you wanted to become out of a health coach out of your personal experience. Now, moving on to what are some misconceptions in people about forming health? We did touch about like conditioning, and some people it's easier and some people not easier. Yes, but the people category which finds harder to change, have some misconceptions or beliefs. So in your expertise or experience, like, have you come across people talking to you about when you say or recommend something, and what is their belief system towards a misconceived belief system?
Well, the biggest one, the biggest myth about habit change or behavior change is, and you see it all the time on social media, on Instagram and all these places, is it takes X number of days to make this a habit, which is, there's no science behind that whatsoever. Yeah, it takes 21 days to make meditation a habit, or it takes 45 days to make jogging. It's just complete garbage, because there are some things that it may just take 2 days to make it a habit if it's something that's really enjoyable. On the other hand, there's some things it may take 100 days to make it a habit. So that is the biggest misconception people have. They believe these memes they see on social media. Oh, it takes 45 days. And the biggest problem with that is, if they believe, or say it takes 21 days to make meditation a habit, well, what happens then on day 22, and it's not, they don't feel like it's a habit, then they think they failed. And that's one of the biggest problems with these memes and all this garbage that people say about it takes so many days. When people pass that number of days, they then think they failed.
Okay. So I'm just going to contradict this thought process here of yours, like 21 days, 45 days, and other things. I've read in a neuroscience backup, like it is a strategy where your mind sets the target. I do get your point. I'll come to that one later on. When your mind is actually, you're exposed to a new habit or a new change in your life, it takes, your mind needs to understand or process things, what you're doing, and whether you're happy with it or not happy with it. As human, we always expect value and outcome of whatever we are doing because of our problem solving and analytical brain in the cortex. Yeah. And if something which is new, then the brain starting to understand the process itself takes 3 weeks. And we do apply this on the rehabilitation for people. Yeah. And that's why the rehabilitation is set up as an 8 weeks program, a 6 weeks program, or 12 weeks program, evidence-based part. But still, if you're going through that, that is the background where when you're delivering some care to people, that's the background. But it depends on an individual. Your other point, when you say that, oh, this is garbage, people, if they want to change, they can change. Yeah. And that is there, where there is a will, there is a way. Yeah. If even they go through that 8 weeks or 12 weeks, it is up to them whether they wanted to follow that after that or not to follow. That is their choice, as the freedom of choice, what every human have. But in terms of like when it comes to this misconception, I do understand, like you say that people believe this 21 days, and according to your view, it is not, you're not going with that. You're not agreeing with that.
Well,
Is that what I
it's not
understand?
according to my view. That's actually backed up by science. And what I'm getting at is, it's, they say 21 days to anyone. That is what's wrong, because that's clear. For some people, yes, that is true, but not for everyone on Earth. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah. So what you're trying to say here is to assess the psycho-behavioral patterns of an individual
Yeah.
before they can actually target the number of days or number of weeks, what the outcome would be. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't just say, pull a number out of the air and say this is applicable to everyone on Earth. That's just simply
So,
ridiculous.
yeah, so it's similar to my analogy is like a 21-year-old individual will be able to run a marathon in 20 minutes. Maybe the other category or group of people with 65 or about around that age category might take a longer time depending on their physical endurance and their capacity. So that's to analogize what you're saying here. It depends on people's individuals kind of whatever the psychoeducation, the capacity, and the belief system. I do believe a great believer in whatever the people are conditioned when it comes to condition, how their value system and belief system are conditioned comes down to whether they can change easily or not and finding harder. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different factors involved, and it's different for every person. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So one size doesn't fit all.
exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, great. So I'm happy that we agree on this. So let's dive into the topic about the traditional approaches to behavior change. Yeah. So when you talk about your thing is habits and health, all right? So when it comes to tiny habits, yeah, and what do you see as a behavior change strategy you can actually incorporate to people or advise people to audience? Yeah.
So the reason why, so let me just give you some background on Tiny Habits. So Tiny Habits is a methodology created by a behavior scientist at Stanford University called B.J. Fogg. And he wrote a book called Tiny Habits, I forget, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. I can't remember when it was. But he actually devised the methodology, I think it was like 20 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been working on behavior change, behavior science for like 25 years or something. And what the book suggests, and Atomic Habits, who most people are more familiar with the book Atomic Habits than they are Tiny Habits. Atomic Habits has very similar thought process to Tiny Habits, being that it's about making habit change, doing it in a very small way. So, for example, you mentioned marathons earlier. Some people decide, right, I'm going to run the London Marathon in 4 months' time, and then it would be crazy if you, on your first day of training, you've never done a marathon before, you don't do any running normally. If on day one you decide to go and run 25 miles, that's clearly not going to work for anyone. So tiny habits would suggest, okay, you want to run a marathon, so day one, maybe just walk around the block. You maybe not even run, just walk around the block. And then you do that for a few days, and then maybe you gradually start to run just for a few 100 meters or something, and you gradually increase this. But what it's more about, it's not so much in that example, it's not the distance is irrelevant. It's about the consistency. It's about doing something it's ingraining it into your brain. This is something I do on a daily basis. The distance can change, but it's getting you to do something every day. And so you almost want to do it so it's so small that you can't fail. So in the example of meditation, for someone who says they can't meditate, okay, could you meditate for 20 seconds a day? It would be silly if anyone to say, no, I can't do that. Anyone could do that. So if you could get yourself into the habit of meditating, I don't know, a minute every day, once that becomes a habit and it's just something you do every day, at that point, then you can start doing it for longer, maybe for 3 minutes or 5 or 10 or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm. What actually gets me thinking is your advice is great. So set up a smart goals, yeah, small, specific, and target oriented, so you get to feel the outcome of it. Yeah, great. And so in terms of like when you say that earlier mentioned about breathing technique, which I more back up with my background of respiratory physiotherapy. So and then also like in today's world, breathing meditation, breath works and everything has become more popular and people wanted to, you don't need to say to people, like people wanted to reach out to those kind of holistic well-being approaches for their life because they already see the benefits of it. And I think like sometimes the bad things happening in our life tells us what is good. Yeah. So we realize the value of sun under the rain. Yeah. So the pandemic actually has induced this well-being thought process in most of the people's mind. So my point here is I want you to share some expertise on. Can you explain some simple breathing habits? What you advise as a health coach to people in your client group?
I think that the simplest way that I try to, when I'm talking to my clients about breathing, because most people, I'd say the majority of people don't really have a good understanding or they have no conscious awareness of their breath or their breathing and how they breathe. And sometimes, for example, I'll ask people, do you mouth breathe? And you can see them start to think about, because it's not anything they've ever thought about before. But I think the simple way that I try to put it across to people is, because most people aren't really familiar with what parasympathetic nervous system is or the sympathetic nervous system, and it's all just too, it just goes over their head. So I try to simplify it down and say, look, when your inhales are longer than your exhales, typically that will put you in the sympathetic. And that's the kind of flight or fright where you're more anxious, you're more fearful, and you're breathing sort of very fast and shallow typically from the upper chest. The opposite, when your exhales are longer than your inhales, that tends to put you in a parasympathetic where you're much more calm, you're much more rested, and so on. Um, and then in between that is where the inhales and the exhales are roughly the same, or box breathing, or things along these lines. And that puts you in a more coherent or resonant state where you're more focused, you're more alert, you're more sharp, you can think more clearly. So that's the easy way I try to put it across to people. And obviously, it's there. It can be far more complex, but when just trying to help someone understand that's the way I usually explain it to people.
Okay, so you use the terms like calmness and for sympathetic, what is the word you use? Is it you compare?
Sympathetic. So the flight or fright is the sympathetic, and then the rest and digest is the parasympathetic. Yeah.
Parasympathetic. Okay. Okay. So, and do you see a response that while doing this kind of way of teaching to the people about breathing, do you see a response from your client group able to engage with it or to be consistent? Because that is very key for them to get that in, as a part of the habit of their life. Yeah. How do you see that working with people?
I think people are really surprised by how much they can change how they feel just by breathing, because it's a concept that's completely new to most people. So I showed them a couple of simple breathing exercises. One that a lot of people know now is the physiological sigh, for example, which is a great way of kind of down regulating or bringing us down into the parasympathetic, bringing us down into the calm, feeling more calm, less anxiety. And when people learn breathing techniques like that, it just amazes most people that they can change how they feel by some really simple breathing exercises.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And also like and the physiological side is a great mention there. And also like people are actually able to have a clarity in the mind when they engage with the breathing or breath work, isn't it? Like getting that oxygen and also working and becoming body awareness and senses that all plays multiple things plays in them. Yeah, great, thank you. So again, your expertise of your certification in nutrition as well. So nutrition is often like when it comes to, we have two extreme groups of people, people who actually binge eating and then people who actually very low anorexic. So now when it comes to that topic, it gets very complicated to explain certain category of people. Yeah. And they have the reasons behind that for doing it. Yeah. So that's, I don't want to go into psychological part at the moment, but what are, as a health coach, yeah, if you're having someone like that, what are some small actionable steps you might be able to recommend or advise for them to develop this tiny habits? Okay, this tiny habits can actually make you move out of that category or group of people where you're labeled as.
This is where tiny habits is really important, because when people try to make massive changes, especially around what they eat, it doesn't work. Typically it might work for a couple of weeks, and then they find it too difficult, it's boring, or whatever, and then they just give up and they go back to how they were eating before, which is, it's terrible. So the best way to help someone do what they have to want to do it, because if they don't want to do it, then it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
But if it's something they want to do and they want help in doing it, then I try to find out, where are they now? Are they eating a lot of junk food, a lot of processed food? What is it they're doing right now? And then just make some very small changes. Because if this is the middle, and this is eating tons of processed food over here, and then over here is being extremely healthy. Well, you can't put anyone over there just like that. It's not going to work. But if they're here, we want to move them a little bit to here, and then gradually get them into the middle before we try to get them anywhere over the excessively healthy area. So we just make a couple of small changes. So maybe they're eating a lot of processed food. We don't try and eliminate all the processed food at once, because that's probably not going to work for them.
Mhm.
But we try to make a couple of healthy substitutes and get them used to that there's nothing drastically that's changing, and then keep making small changes like that until the point where they start to realize, actually, this is much easier than I thought it was going to be.
Okay, so you in the first place don't actually make them feel they are doing everything wrong, but like you make them feel yes, okay, it's okay, but there is the other way, and a moderation is a key to achieve you to that goal. Yeah, great. Thank you. And now, I do remember when we had a little bit of a brief talk earlier, you mentioned that you were also in functional medicine. So I'm just dipping in all your expertise here to bring out the value to the audience as well. So when it comes to the movement, it's a very important part of health. Yeah. And active lifestyle and other things, you can understand where I'm coming from. So, but some category of people will struggle with it, especially people with chronic illnesses, more prominently arthritis, and our population of older age group category is also increasing very high, and this plays a huge role here, the functional medicine. So could you share some of your experience of work in what category of people you came across in your expertise of functional offering that skill, and how did you find the care system is suitable for different, is there a different category of care system with functional medicine for different category of people? Or is it like, okay, this is what, it's a one size fit all, and then this is what I'm going to deliver in functional. For example, just to make you understand, if someone thinks of physiotherapy, they think of sports massage or manipulation. That's prominently known for physiotherapy, but then people actually getting to know that there is also specialization inside physiotherapy, like medical doctor, and musculoskeletal, neurology, cardiorespiratory. I myself in the cardiorespiratory specialized. So is there something like a specialized category? That's what I'm trying to ask, yeah, in functional medicine, and how that category of offers to different people.
So a couple of things you said there are sort of mixing functional medicine and functional movement, which are not quite the same. So the whole exercise thing is more about functional movement, whereas functional medicine is a more sort of holistic way of looking at lifestyle change in general. So it's looking at nutrition and exercise and breathing and stress and sleep and all of those things. That's what functional medicine is about. It's about trying to help people improve their life, change their lifestyle, not with using medication. It's about lifestyle change. So that's what functional medicine is about. Whereas functional movement is more about, there's a lot of people who don't like gyms. They're intimidated by gyms. They don't like the culture. Maybe they perceive it as being cliquey or whatever the case may be. So functional movement is about doing things just in a playground, in a park, just doing things at home where you don't necessarily need to use gym equipment. You're just doing like sort of calisthenics, which is more body weight
Yeah.
exercises where
Yeah.
you're just doing things like press ups and pull ups and sit ups and stuff like that. So you're not yet necessarily using sort of weights or machines or anything like that. But when it comes to people who are extremely have a lot of issues with movement, you mentioned a few conditions, and I find it very difficult even just to do simple things. There's there are many forms of exercise which are really the most beneficial form of exercise is actually walking. It has so many benefits, and people completely forget that when they talk about exercise. They feel they have to go running 10 miles or they got to be lifting weights. So walking has so many benefits. But if someone is even that is difficult, even just sitting in a chair, and it may be that they're not able to do this themselves, but just simply getting up and down from a chair squats. And if their movement is so impoverished where that is difficult, then if they can have someone to help them, just simply get up and sit down and do 5 sets of that. That can help people enormously, just doing something as simple as chair squats.
Yeah, yeah, that's good, and I do agree that walking is a simple activity. And when it comes to when you say that people have difficulties even to adapt to this simple activity, what do you think the barriers are for them to get into the adaptation of walking?
It's sometimes it's about school, because a lot of people had a bad experience at school with PE, and it wasn't pleasant for them, and so they
This
have
is
this
actually a
negative.
news for me. Okay, so so what you wanted to, this actually might lead to some changes what we can discuss if you would like to discuss. So because early experience plays a huge role in the behavior of a people. Yeah, yeah. So why do you think that? early experience of PE is actually bad? Like, is it the way it is delivered or the activities involved or?
Yeah, for some people that had a traumatic experience at school with PE, maybe their PE teacher was not very empathetic and just was like sort of telling them all the, what they have to do, and maybe they weren't very good at certain sports, for example, and they didn't feel comfortable playing football or netball or whatever the sport may be, and because they weren't particularly good at it, they were always made to feel bad, and the teacher said, "Oh, you're rubbish," and sort of things along those lines, and then they just end up with a very negative view of sport because of the experience they had at school doing PE classes, and in their adulthood, they now don't want to do exercise because it always brings back bad memories for them.
Yeah, yeah, and thanks for sharing that actually, because in my personal experience, I do see a difference of affinity towards activity levels. If my children are school going, yeah, I have a primary and a secondary, yeah, and I was previously in Dublin when my the first child was in primary, yeah, he was into activity, he was into football, he was into swimming and other activities. And moving to England, I did notice this change, what you're talking about. He got less motivated into the physical activity. Yes, according to curriculum, there's two PE sessions per week, am I right? And but like and this is actually going to be a huge kind of thinking process to be involved here in the school curriculum and they're designing. And if majorly the active lifestyle, if we are promoting, NHS England is promoting active lifestyle and health watch and other things, if that the basic route we need to focus on how to incorporate that active lifestyle, isn't it? And my the primary, who is a second child, and she doesn't have an idea about physical activity, yeah, and occupied with all the gadgets and other things, making that the concept of even physical activity. And I'm feeling embarrassed. Like, if anyway, this is the truth. Actually, I have to share so that it's not only me going through this difficult time as a parent. There's most parent out there going through this difficult time, and trying to push them out for walking even is harder for parents. Yeah, because they're not getting the concept of the physical activity. Yeah, true. And so, what might be actually in a way of, yes, hypothetically we are going to talk here, because what changes can bring in that interest or engagement of active lifestyle if we are given an opportunity to design the curriculum for PE for school.
When it's fun, that always makes it easier. So good teachers know how to make exercise fun for the kids that they're teaching, and that changes everything because all of us enjoy doing things that we enjoy that have some kind of element of fun in them, and then we're much less likely to not do that because we enjoy doing it. So that's the way always to try. If it's something that you want to do and you're struggling, if you can find a way of adding some fun or some enjoyment into it, it's much more likely you're going to be able to do it on a consistent basis.
Yeah, yeah, I do agree. And so give it in a more kind of appealing way where the children can consume and create a concept in their mind. I had an experience of, I'm talking about 2011, went to Netherlands to a conference, and I saw everyone on their bikes. Yeah, the bike in the streets, and even Netherlands is having a longer winter period. Like we, because why I'm saying this is this has been highlighted in some research as a barrier for people to get out. Yeah, cold and winter and other things. But even in the cold, I was visiting that conference in November time, so it's so cold there as well. So, but I see people out there in the bike. So, is there some kind of changes then the government should adopt, and when it's the health watch public for the NHS or the government itself initiative, any little changes you can think of suggesting, if that is an opportunity, what would you suggest?
Well, the example you just used about the Netherlands, and if you think about that, that is their norm. That's normal for that society to
Yeah.
be on a bike on a regular basis. They think of that as normal, whereas that's not thought of as normal here. So it's about changing what is seen as normal. So if And there have been changes made in many parts of England in over the last 20 years where they've tried to make cycling safer, which is imperative to try to get people to do that kind of thing more. There's also been more encouragement to help people, maybe go running and stuff, in parks, and then there's the park run. I don't know if you're familiar with park run. It happens all over the country on a weekly basis, and all of these things are great ways of encouraging people to take part in more sort of physical activity. So yeah, things along more initiatives like that will help really.
Yeah, yeah, I do agree. Thank you. So Tony, it was actually great exploring the breathing and what offers you do in the functional medicine and tiny habits and consistency. We talked a lot when it comes to consistency and tiny habit formation, whatever age group it might be. Yeah, people's mindset plays a huge, huge part. Yeah. And could you share some of your experience, how you actually used your expertise and skills to influence people's mind in forming a habit or to take your advice or whatever it can be. Yeah. For everything, the mindset plays a huge role. Yeah. Could you share some of your experience?
I mean, yeah, my psychology has always been something that's fascinated me from when I was very young. And in many ways, I mean, I mentioned that I was a DJ for a long time, and I also worked on radio for a long time. And
Wow.
in many ways, what I was doing as both a DJ and on the radio was influencing people. And so there was definitely elements of mindset and psychology there. But in the, you referred to, I did a course in neuroscience a few years ago. In the health coach course that I did with the Functional Medicine Academy, a huge component of that was about positive psychology and about mindset. And a book that I love, and I'm sure you'll be familiar with, is Growth Mindset, which is so important especially in today's world. So your mindset plays a massive part. I was having a conversation yesterday about this, where there was a number of DJs who are considering retiring because they've had a few unpleasant guests approach them and speak quite negatively to them. And what I find interesting, and this is applicable to any industry, I'm just using the DJ as an example, whereas they focus so much on these one or two examples of someone being negative to them and completely forgot about all of the amazing positive comments and people who were praising them for how much fun they gave them. And they just dwell on these one or two negative ones and ignore all the tons of positive feedback that they've gotten. And this is so, we have this negativity bias, humans do. And we tend to focus on those one or two negative things and ignore all of the positive stuff.
Yeah, this is an emotional hijack in most of humans, isn't it? Like if we could have had loads of positive experience and one little drop of ink compared to the one little negative incident discolors everything in whatever we think about us. And yeah, that's so. How do you then, like, have you any experience of similar what you mentioned here, like some of the DJs? Have you had those experiences yourself, or how did you overcome them?
I've got quite into, as I mentioned, I'm quite into psychology. I'm also really into philosophy. And one of the things about philosophy, well, I think one of the things that's really helped me with philosophy is I've realized that it's very difficult for anyone to offend me because I've learned that taking offense is a choice that we make. And it's not a choice I choose to make. So if someone was to insult me, well, they're just making themselves look stupid because well, there's two ways to look at it. If someone insults me. First of all, I think, well, is what they're saying, is there any truth to it? If there is truth to it, well, then I can learn something from that. If there's no truth to it, well, then they're just making themselves look stupid because there's no truth to it. So I think we have much more of a choice in whether we decide to take offense. But too many people, they almost look for the opportunity to take offense at things which were never intended to be offensive in the first place.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. So you're talking about high self-esteem, what you're having, which showcases that. You're not going to take offense, and I know my value. Yeah, whoever says whatever. Great. Thanks for sharing that. And can you also share some success stories where you transform lives of people with your health coaching?
Usually it's, I think when people come to me, and often they come to me with, they will think they need help in one area, and it will be something like losing weight, or it will be maybe they've got asthma and they want me to help them with some breathing issues, or but it's usually about one particular thing. And what surprises people is I often don't just address that one thing, because what to help with that one thing actually involves looking at all the whole picture holistically. So if someone has got a problem with trying to lose weight, you can't just simply look at nutrition or just simply look at exercise. You need to look at the sleep and how much stress they have in their lives, and how, if they are doing much movement, what kind of things are they eating? Is there hydration? How's that? Maybe it's something to do with the microbiome. Maybe they're not eating any fermented food, or there's so many different things. And so I think the thing that has surprised a few of my clients is they initially came to me with the one thing they wanted help with, and because I've helped them to look at all of these other things, and not only is that one thing improved, like maybe they've lost weight, but they also feel better. They've got more energy, their moods are better because now they're sleeping better, they're moving more, so they're thinking more clearly as well. Maybe their breathing has improved as well, so now they can play with their grandchildren, whereas before they couldn't play with their grandchildren. Where initially all they wanted me to do, or all they wanted, they thought, was to lose weight. So
Mm.
I think they're the things that I think I surprise people, because they come to me, they just want me to do this one thing for them, and actually we end up changing lots of small things.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, you try to go to a garden center to get one plant, but you wanted to buy a lot of plants to make a garden center in your own backyard. So it's. I just actually try to correlate with analogy to make myself understand and also to people to understand. So it's really good. Like, it's not our body system and something, some problem actually pops up in our body system, or some behaviors is a problem. Then it is not one thing, it has multiple things interlinked, and that's a good concept of looking at a holistic picture. Yeah, great. And in order to actually deliver this, you need to actually have a lot of kind of yourself more prepared, because people are going to come with multiple things, as you say, like they might be having some psychological issues as well behind whatever they're doing. Yeah. And so how do you tackle all those things? What are the things for yourself to be stronger to tackle and to also have training to tackle? There are two things involved here.
I'm not sure I understood the question. So if someone has a psychological issue,
So if a person's, as you mentioned, example, coming with a nutritional issue, say eating disorder or whatever it is, and then you mentioned that, oh, that is not only the thing case, but it's also interlinked with their activity level. They also interlinked with their social connection. It's also interlinked with how they connect with their own family, like the grandchildren example, what you've given. So for this to deliver, again, you're going to use the expertise, what you have, but that alone is not enough. Yeah, you need to be mentally strong as well to tackle and communicate. Okay, so in your experience of a DJ, the communication plays a huge role as well. Yeah, and in any field, communication, and also to make social connection, communication actually matters a lot. And not all people who communicate make connections. Yeah, so
not at all.
it is about that I'm asking. So how do you connect? Maybe I should reframe. How do you connect with your client group?
Well, the by far the most important thing is listening. And that is so important, because sometimes someone can start speaking or telling you an issue, and if you immediately decide you know what the answer is, and you're just waiting for them to finish so that you can tell them the answer, then you're probably not going to be able to help them, because you haven't really listened to the rest of their explanation. And in the things they continue to say, there may be some really important things came up about something that happened in their childhood, or some things that are happening at home, or stress that's happening at work, or and a combination of all of those things is resulting in the issues that they currently have. It's not just because they're because they're not able to run because they broke their leg 2 years ago. It's probably a combination of so many different things is why they've got the problems they have now. So listening is really hugely important.
Right. And again, like after listening, which is very much true. I totally agree with that. Empathetic listening and not interrupting, not provoking solutions before they could complete. Totally, totally agree. And which we apply as a therapist to our client groups. And in terms of when they approach a health coach, they already have a target, what they wanted from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously that is another factor. Even if you're actually providing some solution, they're not going to take it in a different way. Yeah, do you agree? And so they already hear, that the value has already been defined when a client approaches you, what value you're going to give it to them. But some solutions, what you're offering might not be connecting with them. Yeah. So I'm using connecting instead of communicating here. So how do you actually then do you give them the choices like or do you actually modify earlier you did mention about giving it tiny and it's not one size fits all and other things you earlier described those things I don't get it and I believe audience also get that concept but if someone is actually finding resistance to your solution what would be your approach?
So if I'm not able to connect with them in a good way, and maybe there is miscommunication between us, then it may well be they're better off working with a different health coach because obviously I'm not going to be perfect for everyone. We've all, we personality and communication is so important with whoever we're working with. And so there will be people who I won't be able to connect well with for various reasons. So literally, I know hundreds of other health coaches. So if it is a situation where clearly someone needs help, but for whatever reason I'm not able to communicate with them in a way that's helping them, then I'd probably just recommend that, by then I would have probably understood more about their character, their personality, and I would probably know someone who maybe would be able to get through to them easier than I have been able to. So then I usually when I recommend other people to someone, I don't like to just give them one recommendation because I don't want them to feel I want them definitely to go to this person because maybe I'm making money from that. Usually I would, and it's the same thing even when I was DJing. I would always give three suggestions. That's the way I always do it, or three recommendations of three different people, and allow them to make the choice which person do they think is going to be better for them, rather than me only recommending one person. That's the way I usually work.
Great, great. Thanks for sharing. Actually, that's actually a good strategy as well, am I right? Like you're not deciding, okay, you should be going to this person. Maybe they are not finding that person also great, and that might also be a backfiring. So that's really a good. And this is actually explains that how we can work with people to understand their psychobehavioral patterns and to also provide value rather than taking offensive, like we're not connecting. But here I'm giving you value. Okay, you can have value with other people. Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I'm just going to looking at the questions here. Sustainability is the topic what we're going to discuss next. Yeah.
Okay.
So when it comes to habit, that is relevant to the concept of consistency. Yeah. So when you're consistent, you're going to sustain that. You retain that in your formed as a habit. So how can individual ensure that habits they build are maintainable in a long run?
Well, they have to be easy to do. They have to enjoy. They have to want to whatever that new behavior is that they want to achieve. It has to be something that they really want. Because if it's just something that's sort of vague, and yeah, maybe I'd like to have it, then they're probably going to not make that into a habit. But if it's something they really want and they can see the benefits of achieving that new behavior, and if it's easy to do, all of those things will make it much easier to sustain. And again, they have to do it on a daily basis, probably, because, for example, exercise is a great example. It's not necessarily good to exercise every day, but on the other hand, for some people, if they try and just exercise 2 or 3 times a week, it becomes difficult because if they're not doing something on a daily basis, it's then hard to make it a habit for some people. So whereas something like meditation or running, you can do that every single day. But when there's a bad habit that you want to ingrain and make it into a behavior you just do habitually, if you're not doing it on a daily basis, and so exercise is the one that really comes into this, then it can become difficult. So what I try to help people do when it comes to exercise is do something every day. It doesn't mean you have to go to the gym every day. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to go running every day, but do something every day. Just so you ingrain into your brain, every day I do something to in some form of movement, some form of exercise, even if it's just doing a few squats at home or whatever it is. But that's the most important thing is it has to be done so consistently that you just every day it just enters your brain. Oh, I have to do. Well, it's not even that I have to. You just do it. You don't even necessarily think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. And while you're saying this, I'm also connecting this concept of sustainability as a medicine for loneliness, because another big pandemic is people having this loneliness. Yeah, it's not about being crowded with people, it's about how they feel about themselves. Yeah, connected with people. So if they engage with this kind of consistent pattern of little activities, that's already going to provide them opportunity to connect with people, being out with the nature, connect with people or nature, whatever it is. So that's uh, that's what I'm seeing. So you can have your say.
Yeah, and something you just touched upon there as well that's really important, and it's important to habits in general is identity. So you talked about how they think about themselves, and this is one of the most important aspects of habits because if, for example, if I'm trying to help someone to lose weight or to change their behavior in some way to improve their health, how they think about themselves is really fundamental because and so something I try to suggest to people is before you do something, before you eat a donut or before you do something which you perceive as being unhealthy, think about, see if you can get this into your brain to do it on a regular basis. Think about what would a healthy person do in this situation, and so how you think about yourself, and if you can change your identity to think about have a more positive identity. And so someone who maybe is lonely, in the example you used, if they think about themselves as a lonely person, it's going to make themselves worse. If they can think about themselves as, oh, no, I've actually got lots of friends. Maybe I'm not seeing so many of them at the moment because of circumstances, but I have lots of friends. I'm not a lonely person. And just by making that change, and that I'm not trying to diminish, I'm not saying it's really easy because obviously it's not really easy for everyone,
Yeah.
but it can be easy, but not necessarily will it be easy, but it can be easy, depending on how how you think and how the help that you're being given and so many other factors.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I touched the subject of loneliness because there are lots of people actually. If you heard about the suicidal rates in England, and it's huge, okay, and that's related to the anxiety, depression levels. And when we delve into these components of illnesses existing, which is now labeled as an illness, yeah, and big when you give a label to something, yeah, it has both positive and negative sides of it. Yeah, you have a label, yeah, you have a problem to say and you have attended, or you label it and you make them feel, oh, I'm this type, okay, I am this person, okay, I start believing that. Yeah, it's a choice, isn't it? So when it comes to habit formation, and health coaches have a huge role, and um which we will touch in a minute about the referrals and other things. But health coach plays a huge role because of the existing chronic illnesses. And when we talk about previously, maybe around 10 years back, when you talk about chronic illness, we might have been talking about heart disease. We might have been talking about arthritis. No one ever mentioned mental health as a chronic disease. Now, mental health is a non-communicable chronic disease, yeah, highly topper, among the other chronic diseases like chronic respiratory heart disease and stroke and other things. And so, health coach, where I'm now emphasizing is having you on our show. It's really helpful to get to know people that you're existing for support, as an health coach? And also how, as a simple advice and the way of approach you give, talk about in the show, give them an idea. What are the approaches? Okay. If I think of Tony, some of the phrases or whatever you talk spoken here might actually ring a bell. Okay, I need to talk to him to get out of the valley out of fear. So that's a bit like the loneliness part. If someone is approaching you and you've explained about self-identity and this choice, you can connect. And do you have any kind of interlinks or when you everything is an integrated care system, what in papers, yeah, when we talk about that. But like in practical sense, we have to take efforts to integrate, like yourself as a health coach, I have myself as a respiratory physio or a psychotherapist, whatever role I play, and I need to take an initiative to signpost them to connect with people. So how do you see that loneliness, if someone is approaching loneliness and out of loneliness, they might have this eating disorder. Yeah, that opens a can of worms. Yeah. So, and then you pick up these things. And how do you actually then, in your experience, have you done any kind of integration or signposting for one client or case studies you can describe?
I mean, if someone has problems with loneliness, if that's the specific example that someone is having a situation with or an issue with, then it's trying to help them maybe find out what things that they're enjoying, what things do they do for fun, or what things would they find enjoyable. And for example, maybe 20 years ago they used to like playing backgammon, as an example. Well, then, is it possible? Can we find some club within a 5 mile radius where people play backgammon, and you could go along there and meet other people who play backgammon? Or maybe it's that they enjoy knitting or they enjoy stamp collecting. It's finding something that that person maybe doesn't do now, but which they used to do and they used to really enjoy. And by taking them back to doing that thing they used to enjoy and doing it with other people who have that same fascination, same love of that, whatever that hobby is, that's one way that a lot of people can be helped. And it's something that this is not going to seem like it's connected at all, but it majorly is connected.
Mm.
One way that sometimes people can be helped with not just loneliness, but many mental health issues is by improving their sleep. Because when people have a lack of sleep, it affects their thinking so much. And especially if someone, for example, is sleeping less than 6 hours every night and they are feeling depressed and feelings of loneliness and many other sort of negative feelings, by improving their sleep, it's amazing how that will affect all those other feelings by improving someone's sleep. And I mean, for example, I've been studying something called Team CBT, which is a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. And what I found quite interesting when working with some of these people, when we were learning more about CBT, and we were looking at different mental health issues, and we were looking at these different case studies. And what I found interesting, is one way to put it, was that every time we would look at these different situations where people had very stressful situations, and then we were saying, they were asking us what would we do in this particular case. And every time these people would talk about all these different tools they had in CBT to help people, but never once did they ever look at, well, let's ask the person how their sleep is. Let's ask them about what levels of stress they got going on at work or maybe at home. And those things are so important. Before you start using all these fancy tools, do the fundamentals. Try and help them with their sleep. Maybe ask them, do they know what a sleep hygiene routine is? If they don't, help them with some basic things like that before you start doing all these psychological tools.
Okay. So your best advice is sleep is going to make healing. Sleep is equivalent to healing of people's mind. What I interpret. Yeah. Did I understand
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Great.
definitely.
And now let's actually move on to something I put as a question because I don't forget to get the value out of you today. So can you provide some insights or the science behind the background of habits formation and why some feel easier, as you said that earlier, conditioned with touched about the condition part of it. Why some actually feels easier other than the
So
condition?
another important component in order to make a habit habitual, so something that you do daily, consistently, is you have to celebrate the habit in some way. You have to give yourself some feedback. I've done this. This is, good. I'm achieving this thing that I want to do. And we're the British are probably the worst at this, especially British men, because we're so bad at giving any kind of celebration, or like Americans are particularly good at this. We're the opposite. We're particularly bad at this. And same, just giving ourselves recognition that we've done this thing, that is an important aspect of making behavior change, making it effective, and implementing that new behavior that you want to achieve. The more that you can congratulate yourself, the more that you can recognize, yeah, that I'm doing this, I'm actually doing this regularly now, the more likely you're going to be able to continue doing it. Because if you just take it for granted, it's going to be more difficult.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for sharing. And I also, apart from the reward system, yeah, and this actually increases the self-efficacy component inside you. And on top of it, like even if you're not able to achieve it, having that self-confidence of believing in yourself and saying the positive affirmation, yes, I thinking that it's already happened. And what is my thinking about the next level? What I've achieved it, and what will we be doing the next will actually motivate to get into the achievement of that, which I do follow and believe a lot actually in my even my personal life. So now let's actually go on to the final question. Yeah, what are some practical tips you can give to our listeners today on starting implementing whatever tiny habits they have? Yeah. Um, we've spoken different aspects. So what are the, maybe if I could just give you a number, three practical tips you can deliver?
I think for me, the number one thing we can do to improve our health is making sleep a priority. Sleep is so fundamental to every other aspect of health. And there are so many things we can do to improve our sleep. And well, let me reverse that. Most people do so many things that actually denigrate their sleep, that make their sleep worse, and they don't realize, such as having really bright screens on just before you go to bed. Even worse, watching something that's too stimulating just before you go to bed, like a horror movie, or something that's really stimulating your emotions, and then trying to go to sleep straight after that is going to make it very difficult. Even if you do manage to fall asleep straight away, you're not going to get a good quality sleep. It's going to affect the quality. A lot of people think, oh no, I fall asleep straight away. That doesn't mean you're getting good quality sleep. So for me, sleep is the most important thing. And there's a number of things you can do to improve your sleep. And I'll give three very basic things that people can do. So one, and this is going to seem crazy to many people, is go for an early morning walk. Now, people are probably thinking, well, how does having an early morning walk affect my sleep? But it does. I don't want to go too deep into the science behind it, but essentially, by getting out early in the morning, especially if you're able to do this within 1 hour of waking, it has an effect on your melatonin and various adenosine and your sort of chemicals that will help you sleep the following night. So try and do, even if it's just a 20-minute walk, that will help you with your sleep the following night. Other things that will help your sleep, most people on our computers, we have a way of dimming the screen. In the hour before you go to bed, try and dim the screen as much as you possibly can. It's obviously not so easy to do that on a TV. There is a brightness switch. Most people will never use that. But try not to have your screens too bright. Ideally, if you can do some sort of just conversation with your partner, reading a book, do something that doesn't involve stimulating your brain too much. If you are reading a book, don't make it something that makes you have to really think. Make it just have a novel that you're just reading. Conversation is fantastic. Meditation is fantastic. Some stretching. All things like this will help you get better quality sleep. And the better quality your sleep is, the less strain or less stress you'll have, the clearer your thinking will be, and it will help you in so many ways.
Great, great. Thanks for sharing that. And I do agree, sleep is an important component. And you described three tips of practical tips, what people can do. I also believe like expressing gratitude at the end of the day gives a huge, huge boost. Like being grateful puts us in a higher place of like, okay, we have all, because the emptiness creates the overthinking process and people struggle with that. And maybe the day before they had something with their boss, or maybe with a friend, or and maybe 1 year back they had something, and that all thinking process and going with that, even if there's no gadgets, is going to not help them to fall asleep, isn't it? Like so practicing gratitude and in I usually actually light up a prayer routine, like light up in the evening, and that creates some positive vibes or feeling for myself. And so the evening, morning and evening, but the evening actually is about 6 or 6:30 between. I light up light lamps actually, and I'm trying to pick up the right word, the lamps. And so that gives, actually looking at the lamps itself gives a positive vibe, and that negative process of thinking is just eliminated. I'm not recommending everyone to light up a lamp or a candle, but it's one of the ways, if people choose to do, that's something that is also helpful, and I would like to share that here. So we are coming to the close, and thank you for sharing your value for the more than an hour here now. And it's great listening to you, and I've learned a lot from whatever you do. And because I believe that there is a value for health coach, well-being coach, social prescriber, and lots of other professionals for an integrated care model for people with or without chronic illnesses. Yeah, because as humans, we have multiple organs, multiple function, but if you are focusing on one sole practitioner or one sole thing, it's not going to eliminate that out of us. So thank you again, Tony, for being here and kindly accepting and sparing your time so long with me in this podcast. And I will actually, if there is an opportunity, be with you in another podcast. I love to. And if you have a few words, final words to share here.
Well, just thank you for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And yeah, work on your habits, people, because it's yeah, it's the best way of getting what you want to achieve is by implementing. Working on your habits is the best way of achieving what you want.
Yeah, yeah, great. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Tiny Habits for Lasting Change. We hope today's episode has inspired you to take small, actionable steps towards healthier habit formation and happier life. Remember, transformation begins with a tiny habits, one tiny habit at a time. Join us next time as we continue to explore the journey of unlocking your full potential. Stay healthy, stay motivated, and keep unlocking those tiny, healthier habits. Signing off, Devi Sundar.